President, Your Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, it's very difficult to talk after so eminent personalities and to talk about a subject which is very difficult and concerning the Syrian crisis or Syrian war and its aftermath. I would rather maybe to use the word more Syrian issue than Syrian conflict, and examine the consequences of this issue on the world order. And indeed, as it has been said, that the whole world changed after the collapse of communism, and we assisted to the transition from the bipolarization to a unipolarization with an all-powerful United States of America imposing themselves, like, as it has been said, the global police or police of the world. And we have seen that especially just at the end of the war in former Yugoslavia. And I think that in a way that was normal after that struggle between the two blocs, the Eastern and the Western Bloc. The Eastern Bloc disappearing with the collapse of the Soviet Union, who used to lead this bloc, and the growth of the United States in the world. And it took Russia a certain time to rebuild, to reconstruct the state from the inside before reappearing on the international scene. In my point of view, I think that the situation in Syria and the military intervention of Russia in Syria that allowed her to come back and on the international stage and become again a power like it has been before. What are the real motivation of the Russian intervention in Syria, military intervention, and what were the most important elements and factors that helped Russia to make this comeback to the international scene? We have to examine the real situation in Syria, which allowed Russia to make this comeback. In fact, the troubles in Syria, it has been stressed, especially by Mr. Somar al-Assad, started like all the other problems under the framework, I would say, of the Arab Spring, which is, as President Gemayel said, it is in fact an endless winter with strikes, with demonstrations, with a popular protest movement, with some slogan used by all and during all those popular protest movements in Syria and other countries. People seeking for freedom, people fighting corruption, seeking democracy, and so on and so on. And we assisted during this situation to the emergence of fundamentalist, terrorist groups, and within a chaos in Syria. And those groups, they like the ISIS, Muslim Brothers, the Al-Nusra Front, they were using religion for political purposes. And this what have been said also by my friend, His Excellency President Amin Gemayel, within a strategy which is the instrumentalization of religious and communal factors for a political purpose. Unfortunately, some outsiders were using those factors, playing with the fire, and despite the presence of my friend, Mrs. Rosine Gaugy, I will be very much critical toward the United States of America and the strategy of using the religion, using fundamentalism, playing with the fire in order to destroy stability of states. And as far as we are in Cyprus, I think we have to remember, as President Gemayel again said, that this experimentation was used in Cyprus in 1974. And it has been exported 1 year after, in 1975, to Lebanon, before it had been transferred to Iran in 1979, in Afghanistan, and after collapse of communism, to Eastern European countries like Chechnya, like Bosnia, like Kosovo, and whatever. And in Cyprus, in Lebanon, as President Gemayel said, it was not on, I would say, religion or religious factors, it was more on communal. But little by little, especially during the war in Afghanistan, it was more focused on religion to create this stabilization, not only, by the way, of Afghanistan or those countries, but also to the security, I would say, the stability of the whole world. Afghanistan, we all know that this situation, those groups were encouraged, they were helped, they were created by intelligence services, and especially by the United States intelligence services. Al-Qaeda was a creation of the United States intelligence services in order to fight the Soviet Union. Osama bin Laden, with his nickname Tim Osman, was, by the way, an agent of the American CIA. This strategy and this way was also used by the Americans in order to encourage Islamist groups like Muslim Brothers, like Al-Nusra Front, and some other leaders like Mr. Fatullah Gulen, for example, who lives, by the way, in the United States of America. This strategy was also used by the allies of the United States, by Israel, who encouraged Hamas in order to change the Palestinian resistance and to destroy the secular Palestinian resistance of PLO, and in order to make it more a resistant, detained, and backed by Islamist groups. This strategy was also used in Syria. And the Syrian issue gives us an example with Al-Nusra Front, with Muslim Brothers, and with ISIS. And this is not myself who's stressing that. If you read the book, Hard Choices of Hillary Clinton, you would see that those are the Americans who were helping the creation of this, as my friend Constantine was saying, the political Islam. And not only that, what about the ISIS? What about Al-Nusra Front? This is Mr. Ban Ki-moon, who was Secretary General of the United Nations, who accused Israel and urged Israel to stop his support to Al-Nusra Front soldiers in Syria, and this was in his report of the 14 or 17 of December 2014. But the most significant example of the denouncements of this situation, in fact, are the speeches and declarations of President Donald Trump, of course, before he became president, during his campaign. Mr. Trump accused the administration and the intelligence services of his government, of the United States, of creating ISIS. And in one of his speeches during the campaign, and I quote him, it's not my expression, he said, "The co-founder of ISIS is Mrs. Hillary Clinton, this corrupted woman." And again, it's not my expression, it is his expression during the campaign in one of his speeches. This is how those fundamentalist movements were baked, encouraged by intelligence services to create chaos, to create destabilization of states. Unfortunately, the European and the European Union leaders did not notice this danger, did not notice who was really before all those terrorist movements. The Europeans were only watching, I would say, the head of the iceberg without denouncing who is really behind those terrorists. Only when some terrorist act occurred on their territories, they were trying to find a solution to the consequences of these facts. Consequences, and I would say the security one, the attacks, the terrorist attacks, and of course the other phenomenon that is threatening also the security, and I would say the societies in Europe, which is the phenomenon of refugees, or to be more precise, I would say the immigrant movement or phenomenon. Why? Because behind those refugees, there were so many people coming, not only from Syria, from other places in the world, from Africa, North Africa, and whatever. And I will give you one example. I am a lawyer, as it has been said by His Excellency Mr. Kasoulidis, and sometimes I'm on duty because I deal with criminal law. And some people, they come and they say they have some problems, and they declare themselves as refugees from Syria. And as far as I speak Arabic too, and when I discuss with them, I notice that they don't have at all the Syrian accent, but the Moroccan accent, or the Tunisian accent, or the Algerian accent. So they are using this to come and to, between brackets, to be installed in France, taking advantage of this phenomenon of refugees to come and to change country and to be installed in France. So, unfortunately, Europeans were taking a very bad strategy toward the Syrian issue, which led to this disaster that is harming not only Syria and the Middle East, but also Europe. And when I say Europe, it is Europe as a continent, not only the European Union. On the opposite of the Europeans, I mean the European Union, Russia took into consideration this danger. And Russia was taking care of not only her stability, but also the stability of her surrounding countries. I mean, like Chechnya, Kosovo, Bosnia, especially with that way of this contagion movement of fundamentalism, Islamism, and so on. The main aim of the Russian, not only interference, but military intervention, of course, upon the request of the Syrian government, was to help Syria to be restabilized, to find its stability like before, and to protect I would say, the state apparatus, in order to avoid, as I said, this contagion to come to other countries. That's how the image of Russia changed and became the new power helping the other countries to protect their stability, to protect their sovereignty, their independence. And that's how I would say Russia became kind of the leader of the axis of good, while unfortunately the United States, despite the famous speech of President Bush, axis of evil, axis of good, the United States became on the head of this axis of evil, not respecting at all and breaching international public law, imposing every 6 months or year sanctions against countries, using military intervention unlawfully, just to show that the United States is this all-powerful country in the world. In other words, I would say that the Syrian issue led us viewing that we are in another scheme, I would say the opposite scheme than the one that used to be before collapse of communism. We all remember, before the collapse of communism, with this struggle between East and West, we had the free world, led by the United States, but this free word lost all its values. This free word became a word where lacking of freedom, freedom of speech, freedom of movement. All our financial transactions are tracked. If you need to make a transfer, a bank transfer, you have the compliance, and everything started after the 11th of September. We are not even allowed to express ourselves in another way than the one of this system is imposing on us. Maybe not in Cyprus, but we are feeling it in France. This is how little by little we are feeling, in fact, in this former free world, as we are living in a sort of dictatorship without a visible dictator. While on the opposite, the former free world, which totalitarian world, which was led by the Soviet Union, totally changed and is more protecting freedom. This is how the people now are looking to this former totalitarian world, looking for Russia becoming the new free world, toward the former free world becoming, unfortunately, like a dictatorship without, as I said, a visible dictator. Some powers who were, I think, directly or indirectly involved in Syria, like Iran, like China, as Somar al-Assad said, they notice that there are those two axes now, the new two axes of the world, and they were joining little by little this new free world led by Russia, who also took into consideration the fact that we need, especially in the Middle East, to use a balanced relationship with all the parties there. And this is how Russia could, despite the fact that she is installed and interfering in Syria, having very good relationship also with Saudi Arabia, with Emirates, with Israel, with the Palestinians. That's how also Russia attracted China in the axis of good, Iran. What about Turkey? What about Turkey? I am very questioned regarding Turkey, and the position of Turkey never have been straight and clear. It's not because I'm in Cyprus or despite the fact that I'm French, but this is the reality. President Emmanuel Macron said it, and I repeat it. Turkey played a disastrous role in Syria, backing terrorists, ISIS, Al-Nusra Front, and the others, and was also playing that very bad and disastrous game played by Western countries and by the United States in the beginning of the destabilization of Syria. Today, they are playing again this role of being at the same time in NATO, also within and despite their rapprochement with Russia, they are trying to play the American game, the Israelis game, and that's why I think that that game of Turkey is not clear, especially that they are with Qatar backing all Islamist fundamentalist movements, maybe not directly themselves. I mean, the decision is not taken by themselves, maybe by other forces behind. You know who are those forces behind them, in order to go on with this political project, which is the use of religion for political purpose, to push people for fundamentalism, for Islamism, especially in the Muslim countries. And as Mr. Mitterrand said, I totally agree with him, we were assisting in the Arab world to a transition from pan-Arabism to pan-Islamism. Now you ask someone in the Arab world, are you belonging to this Arab nation, Arab region? No, I belong to the Islamic Ummah, which is kind of nation, or millet in Turkish. Those are all those factors on which I think, in my belief, Russia was playing in order to make her come back on the international scene. And the Americans, due to the new policy of President Donald Trump, recognize, in my belief, the mistake done by the previous administration, one of President Bush, father and son. I would not say the Holy Spirit. Mr. Barack Obama was going on in the same policy, backing this strategy of Mr. Brzezinski, the previous Secretary of State Kissinger, who used to be called, by the way, in Cyprus, Killinger, you remember, because he was one of all the troubles happened in 1974 in Cyprus, and so on, especially with the new conservatives in the United States administration. And this is how, with this black image of the United States, with the automatic interference, military intervention all over the world, pushed President Trump to change this also go to war strategy and adopt another one despite his provocative speeches. We all know the way how Mr. Trump, used some very specific expressions and so on, like the one I quoted him when I spoke about Mrs. Hillary Clinton, how I treated her. He dismissed Mr. Bolton when during the conflict on the nuclear problem with Iran. Also, he decided the withdrawal of the troops, the American troops from Syria. I hope we have to trust this change in this new policy of the United States, of the American administration in Syria, in the Middle East, and all over the world. But due to our experience, all of us, I don't know if we can trust really the Americans, especially now as President Gemayel stressed with this soft power. And I wonder if the Americans were not changing its strategy instead of attacking in the front, using this soft power. We're seeing what's happening right now in Lebanon, what's happening also in Iran. When I see what Mr. Soros was doing behind all those popular protest movements in Ukraine and all the Arab other countries, I hope that the Americans are really not so negative in this new approach of their diplomacy. But what we have to know now, we have those two axes. We have the Russian new axis, new power. Then we have this other power, which is led by the United States and remaining there. And now we have a new power or new axis led by maybe the European Union or especially France, with the effort of our president, President Emmanuel Macron, who took into consideration all the mistakes done by his predecessors, like since President Sarkozy until he became president of the Republic, with all those decisions taken in a way destroying also, as Mr. Mitterrand said, the image and the tradition of our diplomacy, the French diplomacy, which is a diplomacy based on the respect of international public law, the specificity, the identity of nations, protecting those specificities. And this is how we are assisting, I think, to a comeback, and I hope sincerely, of France on the international scene, leading the European Union, because we have not to forget that France is one of the main members of the European Union, and with Germany, we were the people who founded, we were the foundators of the European Union. The role of France and European Union as a traditional way of our diplomacy is also to play the mediation between parties and not to fight with a party against the other. And this is what France is trying to play, what Mr. Macron is trying to play, this role by solving the conflict between the United States and Iran concerning the nuclear problem. Also, we have seen the courage of our president, Macron. It's not because I'm French defending him, but for the first time, we have to see objectively how the situation is going on all over the world, and his declarations, open declaration concerning NATO, and it has been said also by Mr. Mitterrand when he said that, of course, NATO, it doesn't have any importance, and we all know that NATO was important during this struggle between Eastern and Western Bloc, and today things are changing. So, as we can see, we have like three axes. In conclusion, we have power of Russia coming back to the international scene. And then we have the United States that remaining with a change, maybe, in her policy. And we have in the middle the European Union and with the role of France, are we in a three-dimension world with Russia, United States, European Union? This is a big question. And I would like to finish with what Mr. Somar al-Assad, or my friend Somar, because I'm used to call him Somar, he stressed something very interesting concerning China and this Silk Road. And I think that it is more complicated. We are not in a three-dimension world. We're not anymore in a bipolarization or unipolarization of the world or multipolarization. We are in a period very difficult to describe, with the growth or the emergence of new powers who were directly or indirectly linked to the Syrian issue. The example was very interesting of Mr. al-Assad when he spoke to us about this draw or painting all around the embassy of China in Damascus. That shows that we are in a very critical situation in the world. In my point of view, this is my character, we have, I think, to be optimistic, and we have to think of a new world, a world where, as a lawyer, I always stress, where we have to respect international public law, and that the politicians and the powers should be subjected to respect of law, and, as President Jumayel stressed when he interfered, answering to one of the questions, taking care of interests of people, because today we are in a way criticizing this traditional politics, the one of the strong imposing his will on the weak. Thank you very much.